2, 3. Welcome to the Rap Report with your host, Andrew Rappaport, where we provide biblical. This is Apologetics Live. To answer your questions, your host from Striving for Eternity Ministries, Andrew Rappaport.
We are live, Apologetics Live, here to answer your most challenging questions you have about God and the Bible. We are part of Striving for Eternity, and we are here most Thursday nights. I can't say every Thursday night because we just skipped 2, and we're going to skip 2 more, but we'll get to that. But we're here to answer challenging questions you have. If you have a question about God and the Bible, just go to apologeticslive.com, scroll down to the duck icon, and there click on that, and you will just have to give permission for your browser to use your camera, but more importantly, your microphone, so that we can hear your question. We prefer those questions that come in. Many people do comment through YouTube and different platforms so that we won't be able to read their comments, or as we have tonight, someone emailed in a comment. And so we always accept those and try to get to those as well. But we do like when people are on stage or with us here. So with that, this is a ministry of Striving for Eternity. And I know that we were gone for 2 weeks while I was moving to the communist country of New Jersey. And that is where I now am. You can't tell from if you were watching from last episode because, well, it's the same plain background behind me. No room for books and things like that. Maybe I'll get a green screen and use that. Then I can make it look like I'm somewhere cool, but that's not tonight. So tonight, the topic that we want to cover is one that, well, it is something that a lot of folks deal with. Should Christians use preferred pronouns? This is it's a big debate with many. Some had it kind of fired up again because Alistair Begg spoke at John MacArthur's memorial service. My understanding is that was by John MacArthur's choice. And so a lot of people brought up the question of, well, Alistair Begg made this comment about going to having someone go to a homosexual wedding of a grandchild and whether that was right advice or not. And so that sparked up, again, some discussions with transgenderism, with pronoun usage, things like that. And so with that, I figured it'd be good. I don't think we actually covered the topic of pronouns. And so I am running solo here tonight, so my co-hosts are not here, so it makes it a little bit harder because that means I got to keep up with all the chats and everything else while speaking. So that is what I'm going to try to do. So, as we look at this topic, there is some discussion to be had with the fact that there's 2 different sides of this issue. Okay, some are going to argue, well, using the pronouns that someone prefers, that's just showing kindness and respect. As Christians, shouldn't we love one another? Shouldn't we love our neighbor? Shouldn't we be willing to go the extra mile for them? However, on the other side of the argument is the issue that, well, is it affirming a lie? Is it affirming something that's not true? That by knowing someone is one gender and calling them another gender because they want to, does that compromise the truth in some way? And so how should Christians balance between compassion for people while having a conviction for God's created order? That's what we hope to tackle tonight. Now, when it comes between those 2 that I last said, what becomes more important to you? And this is a very important thing. Is God's having a conviction for what God has ordained more important for respect and love for other human beings? Or should we seek to love others so that we have opportunities to share the gospel with them? Does that become a greater cause for us over the clear teachings of Scripture? I think those of you who are regular in this audience, you already know where I'm going to lean, I think. So, but that's really where we see a lot of this battle. A lot of people are going to argue over these things as if it's a mutually exclusive, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it is one or the other. However, when we deal with this, I think that we have to recognize a couple things. Well, let's start with Scripture. Genesis, what we see in Genesis 1:27, if you have your Bible open there, because this is the beginning of where we're going to talk about being made in the image of God. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? We see this in Genesis 1:27. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. This verse is very important to this topic because there's two aspects here. One, that we're created in the image of God. What does that mean? Well, we're going to get to that. The other is the fact that when we are created, we're created male and female. There is no third, fourth, fifth, or 52nd option there. God only provides two options, male, female. But what does it mean to be made in the image of God? There's a lot of people in, different religious views that have different ideas of this. But what ends up in this is ideas of can men become angels? Did you know that was in there? That's in there. Are we as human beings, are we just animals? Well, that's in there. And the reason I say it's in there is because when it says that we're created in the image of God, it has the idea that there are certain attributes that God has, that he has given to human beings, that are not attributes that, animals have or angels have. So we are distinct from the animal kind, the plant kind, and the angelic kind. We are the only beings that are described as being made in the image of God. So what we have is that we are not evolved animals, for those who try to argue that for evolution and believing in God, those do not mix. The Bible and evolution are incompatible. Why? Because of this verse, for one, many others. But the fact is that God created Adam and Eve different than he created the animals in the garden. This is Genesis 1. So this is where he is laying out the different things of the ways he has made all the animals. Here's this animal and the birds and the fish and everything else. And as he's going through all that, he then creates man. And this is the creation of man. And man is supposed to have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and every living thing that moves on the earth. That's the very next verse. So man is not part of that creation. He is different from that creation. That is what we see here in this passage. So as we look at that, what is to our question of pronouns, not only are we created different than animals, we are not angels, we have attributes that only human beings have. Well, obviously God has, because God has, and if you take my course that we have at Striving for Eternity Academy on systematic theology, at the very beginning, we start with the attributes of God. Who is God? His nature. And in doing so, what we do is we look at a couple of different things. One, we look at the fact that as we examine the nature of God, the way I have broken up his attributes, and I'm saying this because, well, there's different ways people view attributes. Some will take them as communicable and incommunicable. What do those mean? Those are big words. Well, very simply, communicable sounds like another English word, communication. And that is the root part of it. It is the idea that God, we share attributes with God. We communicate with God with certain attributes that we have. So there's certain attributes God has that we also have. Intelligence, emotions, things like this, wisdom. But then there's attributes that are incommunicable. They're not communicated to mankind, such as omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, okay, all knowing, all present, and all powerful. And so there are attributes that are only for God. Now, I've broken them up differently. I break them up as attributes of divinity. So those are attributes that only God possesses. Then there's attributes that of morality. Okay. And these are going to be attributes where, as you examine them, you'll see that there's things within them that we all can have that as human beings. Okay. So these are ones where we share in them as well. Okay. And so as we look at it, so we have different attributes, animals, and this becomes debatable for some that want to look at this. Some people will say, well, animals have certain attributes of morality. People will try to say, well, if you look at an animal, there's, for example, penguins, that if a penguin, they basically, to stay warm, they circle around in a circle, and to stay warm, they basically, the male penguins just walk with these little eggs on their feet, and they will get to the outside of the circle, and then they work their way inside the circle. And the idea there is that they work together to keep each other warm so that they're never outside too long. And the way some will say is, well, if you end up that these penguins, if one stays inside too long, well, it's morality, because what they'll do is they kick that one out if he doesn't let others move inside. And so they'll say that is something of a morality. Well, that's not truly the case, because this is something that's an instinct for them. So ideas of attributes of morality are going to include things like holiness, righteousness, justice, goodness, wrath, truth, veracity, faithfulness, love, with grace, mercy, long-suffering, kindness, and forgiveness. The animal kingdom doesn't have those things. Yes, the penguins may have an instinct for them to keep each other working together, but you don't see them having court to discuss these things and lay these things out. And so that is the difference there. Now, the third category is ones of personality. And what we see here is that if we look at the attributes of divinity, those are God alone. Things like, as I mentioned, omnipresence, omnipotence, his eternality. But then we have ones of personality. And this, angels have and we have. So angels will be persons, just as God is three persons and we are persons. So these attributes are things like being spiritual, having life, a self-consciousness. Animals don't have a self-consciousness. Emotion, intelligence, self-determination. Now, I know some people will try to say, oh, but my dog has emotion. Is it, or is it a trained experience? I don't think that they're having the emotion the way what we think of as emotion. Okay. But Angels will share in the attributes of personality. So you have these attributes animals don't have. Angels would share in, as humans, in attributes of personality, but what angels don't have is the attributes of morality, because they chose to obey or not, to obey God or not, and that ended up being something that they no longer have a choice. Now, by the way, as I mentioned, the attributes, I do want to recommend that if you go to strivingforeternity.org, go to our website, you go to the page to our store, what you're going to see in our store is that the store has a card. It's a quick reference card, what is it, 8.5 by 11, and it will let you get that for where basically what that does is that gets you all the attributes I just mentioned with some scripture verses for you to have that you could check out. And so that might be something you might want to check out. It's helpful, and actually that is something I use to pray back to God His attributes. It's very helpful, especially if you're struggling in prayer life and don't know how to pray and things like that. So as we look at this, when we say we're made in the image of God, that means that we have the attributes, not just of personality, but also morality. Now, he says that he has created male and female. There is no third option here. It is not that God missed something. It's not that God planned down the road that there would be people that would have differing views. It is the idea that God knows what He created, and when He created human beings, He created them with two genders, male and female. Okay? One thing in this discussion that might help you if you're speaking to someone who, might disagree with you, you get someone who is saying that we should be accepting of different genders. Here's a funny thing. Now, some may, especially if you listen to my Rap Report podcast, you may remember what years ago, I used to, when this transgender stuff started, I was listening to 4 of the more popular transgender podcasts so I could learn their arguments, see what they were saying, what were they trying to claim. And here was the interesting thing. One of the podcasts was all about this guy as he's transitioning to a woman. And I found this universally true with each of them. Whenever they claim they're doing a transition, they claim that gender is fluid, that you could be multiple genders. You could be, as there was a case where a person wanted to say they were a female in the morning and a male in the afternoon, and all the coworkers are supposed to understand that. And they're supposed to respect the pronouns of this person when that person is fluid and can change at any moment. But the reality is, what you end up seeing is every biological male that says they're transitioning to a female, and every biological female that says they're transitioning to a male, one of the things that you always notice is that they never stay the way they are. In other words, as I said with that podcast, the gentleman who was saying he was transitioning to a woman and the podcast was all about his transition, what did he start doing? He started talking about what it's like to wear pantyhose for the first time. And he didn't have girlfriends to show him how to put them on, so he ripped them. Or how to put makeup on. And he didn't grow up with other girlfriends to show him how to put makeup on. And so it was harder for him. Well, the question is, why is he wearing pantyhose? Why is he putting makeup on? Because he knows there's only 2 genders. That's why. He knows that he is trying to be the stereotypical female, wearing makeup, wearing pantyhose, and doing things that girls do. It is what shows you that they know there's only 2 genders, because they are always doing what the stereotypical thing is of the other gender. So when they tell you they're transitioning and they're not staying as they are, they say that this is the way God created them, this is the way they are, and we should accept them for who they are, but they don't accept themselves for who they are. So the first question when it comes to pronoun usage is, if they're not going to accept who they are, if they want to act like a gender they are not, if they're going to say that gender is something that's fluid, and yet they have chosen to act like the stereotypical opposite gender, then they don't believe that gender is fluid. Because if they believe gender is fluid, they wouldn't change at all. The guy wouldn't try to wear pantyhose. He would just say he's a girl. That's it. Done. But he doesn't do that. Why? Because he knows there's only two genders. He knows that instinctively. And this is the thing. And why do they want you to call them by a different gender? Okay, so the first thing is they know what they're doing is not true. They know they're lying to them. They're trying to lie to themselves. And this gets into the question of, why do they do this? Why do they want pronouns to be used? Is because they want you to affirm their lie to themselves. Because if everyone believes this, they feel better, as if now that everyone's believing it, therefore it must be true, and I could feel better about the lie that I'm telling myself. It's the very reason that you have so many people that, name the sin. The person who goes to the bar to get drunk, and he's doing that every week. And what you see there is he's having all his friends, so he thinks. And they like to sin together. What happens when the guy sobers up and isn't going to the bar anymore? He loses those friends often. Why? Because they weren't friends. They were just more comfortable with someone else that would sin with them when they're getting drunk. And it's with so many other things. That's why it said the phrase "sin likes company." It's the fact is that people they feel better about their sin when others are affirming it and joining in. And that is what you have with these pronouns. It is the affirmation of a sinful lifestyle that people have, and they want you to affirm it so they feel better. The whole idea of this movement was that it used to be, they would say, and just because I'm a preacher, it's always good to literate, that whether it be homosexuality, transgenderism, originally they used to go, well, it's just a curse. They're just cursed this way. And then they argued, as they kept trying to push it to be mainstreamed, it wasn't just a curse. It wasn't a curse. It was just a cross they had to bear. This is just the way God created them. They can't help it. They're in the wrong body, and it's just a cross they have to bear. To where now we see it's a crown that they want to wear. They want to be. They want to celebrate this and say, "See, there's nothing wrong with the way that we are." And then the last stage is they want to be celebrated by you. They want you to celebrate who they are. And this is the thing that you end up seeing with groups like this. They want you to affirm their sinfulness, their sinful lifestyle, so they could feel better about what they are doing. All along knowing, they know this, that they are lying to themselves. So by using the pronoun, does that affirm the lie? Well, this is one thing that I'll explain this way. You don't have to use the pronoun, period. There's many ways of dealing with this. Because you may be in a work environment and your work says, hey, if someone says they change their pronoun, I had someone I used to work with many years ago, and he suddenly said he claimed he was a woman, went from the name John to Julie. And we got an email that said everyone's got to refer to John as Julie. and use the pronoun her. Well, I do neither, or did neither. Okay. I just didn't use the name at all. So there's ways of dealing with now. You could have, as if you way back when we started this program, and Matt Slick and I were doing it together. We had someone that came in and said their name is Brenda. Okay. Would I know, because they were never on screen, that they were female? Or no, I wouldn't. And so the thing is that they explicitly said that they were biological male and wanted to be called Brenda. Now, what was this male doing? What he wanted to do is he wanted to have me affirm his lying to himself. He wanted to force me to use the pronoun that he wanted. And so what I ended up doing was just referring to him as the guy that calls himself Brenda. I wasn't going to call him Brenda. Every week that he would come in, and he would be, my name is Brenda. I said, that's nice. You're the guy, you're the biological male that wants to be called Brenda. That is true. There's nothing I'm saying that's not true. He had to admit that there was nothing incorrect about what I said. He was a biological male and he wanted to be called Brenda. But I was not going to call him Brenda. When I was in New York, and in New York City, I used to do open air preaching there. And in New York City, at that time, they said that if you misgender someone, you could be fined $250,000. Wow. $250,000 for calling he a she or she a he. And it's really hard when people say that they're fluid and they could just change any moment, because they could just call the police and say, hey, he misgendered me. Now, how do you deal with that? I'm in public. There's people purposely trying to get me to say something that they're going to use against me. So how could I deal with it? Well, very simply, I use their lunacy against them. That's how I choose to do it. So when I was on the street in New York, and I had, just picture, probably, I'm guessing 6'4". I'm just noticing this. Atomic Apologetics. John says Brenda is still online, or still around online. Really? I didn't know that. John, if you see him still around, you should tell him to join in on Thursday nights, and let's have him come back in and have some more discussions. Maybe send him this one. That should make for some fun discussion. So I'm in New York City. I have someone, there's a police officer there, and I have a guy, I'm guessing 6'3", 6'4", heavy set, thick beard, polka dot dress, heavy makeup, really, really heavy. And that's one of the things with the people that claim to be transgender. They always overdo it. The guys always wear way more makeup than any woman ever wears, and purposely wears things to like show that they're wearing a dress and things like that. And so what you see is this guy was trying to get me to refer to him as a her. Well, I like to have fun with things. You in the audience, regular audience, you know that. And so what do? I said, sir, would you want me to accept your pronoun of a she? And he said, yes. I said, okay. Will you accept my pronoun? And he said, of course. I said, fine. My pronoun is Your Majesty, and you have to bow when you say it. And he's like, I'm not doing that. I said, well, okay. If you're not going to respect my pronoun, I'm not going to respect yours. And I continued to call him he. So that is one tactical way you could deal with this issue. And I actually have in my phone, my nickname in my phone for years was Your Majesty. So if I asked my phone, who am I? it would say, well, you are Andrew, but because we're friends, I can call you Your Majesty. Now that the phones have a separate field for pronoun, I had that in there, which is really kind of funny because when you share your contact information, they purposely want to put the pronoun so that people know what your pronoun is. And my pronoun is Your Majesty. And I do write that in when I go, where was it? I went to a doctor's office and they wanted to know your pronoun. So I wrote Your Majesty. That's my pronoun. I actually went somewhere where, they had your pronoun that they would put on when they, call your order up. It was like a Starbucks or whatever. Well, they said, Andrew, Your Majesty. So it was fun. But I've said for a long time, that's my pronoun. I've just chose it. And people say, that's ridiculous. That's not a pronoun. If you can make up your pronoun, why can't I make up mine? Just help me understand that. If you get to choose what your pronoun is, why don't I get to choose what my pronoun is? And if you can tell me that I must use your pronoun, why don't I get to tell you must use my pronoun? Now, if you remember, we had James White on the show some years ago, talking with someone that wanted to discuss ancient texts of scripture or ancient texts that he claimed were scripture, I should say. And so they never actually got there. But at the beginning of the show, I just decided, since he was purposely wearing a rainbow bow tie and making fun of Christianity and whatnot, I remember he purposely was doing that to be anti-Christian and to show how Christians are bigots and all these things. And so I just figured, okay, I knew because he was on the week before and he had expressed that. So when he came on, I just said, hey, throughout the program, will you refer to me as my pronoun? He said, sure. Now he claims to be an atheist. So I said, okay, for you, my pronoun is God exists and he has spoken. To which he never once used that pronoun the whole show. Right? Why do they get to choose what pronouns they should be and we don't? In other words, we can show the idiocy of their arguments by using their arguments against them. And so that is something you could do. Is it always going to work? Is it always going to be something that you could do? Andrew from Australia says, I'm Your Majesty and you must worship me. I would never say that they must worship me. That's the one thing. But at work, is this something that is doable? Here's a comment that Jesse says, we have a female at work that is transitioning into what they believe to be a male. She wants to be called Matt, but I won't call her Matt either. There are ways around being respectful as someone made in the image of God, but not encouraging them to lie. And this is what I've been trying to say. And so Jesse summarized it very well. There are ways we can be both respectful and loving without sacrificing the truth. Okay? Because that's what we have to do. We don't want to sacrifice the truth. So whether we're using a preferred pronoun, is that really showing love and respect to them, or is it lying to them and affirming them? Here's my concern with using a false pronoun. Now, a name is a little bit of a different thing because I know a guy named Robin. It's a British thing. I know guys named Leslie. Not very common. But you have to realize that a name someone has may not always be gender specific. Now, in the case, as Jesse said, when you have one person changing their name to be that gender, as with the case of John, who wants to be called Julie, that is a little bit harder, right? If I used to work for a guy named Robin, He went by Rob, but his name was Robin. And he went by Rob because Robin's kind of seen as a female name. And so the issue is that does he have a name that's typically associated with a woman? Yes. But it doesn't mean that they're purposely doing it so that you will affirm their lie to themselves, right? So my friend Robin, who's a guy, he's not trying to get you to identify him as a female. He's not trying to be something he's not. Okay? Melissa here has a good example of Robin Williams. And that'd be an example. Robin Williams is a Robin. And so what you end up seeing, though, is when someone is trying to tell you you must use their pronoun, you must use their name that they're forcing because they've changed their gender, now it's something different. Now, when you are using that, is that really loving? There's someone else say, well, you should be loving, you should be respectful. It's not respectful if you don't do that. So most often, the most loving thing you could do is not exactly what's best for others, or what they think, I should say, is best for others. The most loving thing a parent can do for their child is not spoil them and give them everything they want. The most loving thing they could do is discipline them, teach them self-denial, teach them respect for others, teach them not to be selfish, to think of others, to think of God first and then others. That's loving. Disciplining your children is loving. If you lie to your children and tell them that everything they're doing is good, everything's fine, they're wonderful, make them feel good about themselves, you raise spoiled children who feel very entitled. And what ends up happening is, well, you have what we see in Congress nowadays, a bunch of Democrats that cry every time they don't get their way. And they want to have a tantrum every time that, Trump does something. Oh, no, he's a tyrant. He's evil. He's bad. Oh, he's following the law. Oop. Right? But they're suing him over and over because they just can't handle not having their way. A bunch of spoiled brats. And so what you see is that it is loving to not call someone by a false pronoun. The most loving thing you could do is not lie to them, not tell them something that's false, it is loving to not encourage them in this lie they have for themselves. Culture wants to call it mental illness. It's called sin. But they want to lie to themselves and they want you to affirm it so they feel better about the lie. And so it's not loving to do that. Just like it's not loving to know that someone is going to hell and not share the gospel with them or water down the gospel so that you could feel better because then they like you more. A quote I'm well known for is the fact that we do not water down the gospel because we care about people's souls. People that water down the gospel do so because they want to be liked. And quite frankly, we have to get over ourselves. So the thing here that we see is that if we are going to be loving, then what we're going to do is we are going to tell them the truth. Here's what it says in Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Now, when it says, therefore, laying aside falsehood, the word falsehood here is a definitive article. So it means laying aside the falsehood. The word speak is an imperative. It's a command. Speak truth. To who? To your neighbor. Well, your neighbor is not always the fellow believer. So it's not speak truth to those that you get along with. You speak truth to everybody. So we have to lay aside falsehood, and we need to speak truth even to that person that is demanding that you respect their pronouns and saying that if you're Christlike, you're going to love them and you're going to affirm them. And they're going to say this when at your workplace, in your family, in your schools, wherever it may be, they're going to challenge you. But the reality is that by using the pronouns that they prefer, when you know that it is not their biological pronoun with the way that God made them, what you're actually doing is affirming the falsehood that they want to believe. And I would say it's an opportunity for us, instead of affirming their sin, is to take it as an opportunity to witness to them. It's to explain why you can't. When I had a cousin who I love her dearly, and she decided to divorce her husband and quote unquote marry a woman. And she invited me to the wedding, wanting me to come, but knowing pretty much that I wouldn't. Her and her girlfriend, I sat down with them and I said, I'm curious, do you really expect that I will attend your wedding? I just wanted to know when they invited me. And my cousin said, well, I really don't think you will, but we felt that we should invite you. I said, well, I really appreciate the invitation. It's very kind of you to, knowing where we are going to differ in these areas, to invite me. However, I wouldn't be able to attend, and I'd like to share with you why. And so I got into explaining that we're created in God's image, that God created us male and female, that he never intended us to marry outside of male and female. And so to do so, to go to their wedding, would be to affirm a lie. And I would not be loving them. I said the fact that the two of them, and I used their names, the fact that the two of them want to get married and have relations with one another is evident of their sin. And that they need to get right with God. They need to repent and turn to God. So I used it to be able to share the gospel with the two of them. And I still have a good relationship with them today. They still invite me when I'm down in Florida. They invite me over. I haven't made it because I've never made it. I've been to Florida, but just not close enough to where they're at. Would I go get together with them? Sure. Would I have dinner with them? Sure. Would I pay for dinner? Probably, because I do that for lots of people. But I would do it so that I could share the gospel. So let me see if I can get to some of the comments that I saw here. And let me just take them. I just tried to share some. So let's see. Jesse says, glad you are still faithful to do this even when alone, brother. Thank you. I am alone, and I as I'll get to at the end of the show, I will be traveling the next 2 weeks at speaking events. And so I will not be able to do a show for 2 weeks. I will talk to, I know that right now Tom is traveling, and so is Drew, but maybe one of the next 2 weeks, if not both, they'll be here. Andrew from Down Under. Andrew, you still got to find me a church that'll fly me out so I can meet you in person. But Andrew says, no, there's a deeper issue at the foundation of the transition. It's usually a traumatic experience which occurred in childhood. And so let me get to that. I think that's somewhat true, Andrew, but not completely. And what I mean by that is, about a decade or so, a dozen years ago, when you met someone that was a hardcore atheist, I mean, they want to show you they're an atheist. I would always ask them one question. What church did you grow up in? I've asked that question thousands of times, and only once did someone not have a church they grew up in. Well, what's the point that I'm trying to make? Often why they would become a professing atheist is because of the fact that they are rebelling against their parents, the rules that they didn't like because they wanted to sin, and being in church, they were told it was wrong, or something that happened in church. When I go to the gay pride parades to evangelize, it's the same thing. I just say, what church did you grow up in? And I almost never find out they never went to church. And they're always rebelling against their parents or the church that they grew up in. A lot of times if they grew up in some fundamentalist church, some really rigid church, and it had lots of rules and they didn't like that. Okay? But they're not really, it's not always because something traumatic happened to them. Sometimes it's just that they wanted to sin and they knew being in the church prevented them from doing their sin. And so the way they're going to hurt their parents or hurt, someone is to live this lifestyle. They're not hurting their parents nearly as much as they're hurting themselves. They just can't see it. Okay. Jesse says, I refuse to use their pronouns, but I wouldn't be outright disrespectful in calling them by their true gender. Now, this is the thing here. There's a tactful way to do this. We can speak to them without, even when they're, like when Brenda was shoving it in my face, I was going to put it back in his, but I'm not being disrespectful to him. Okay. I was always being respectful, and I got him to admit that, yeah, you're right there. What you're saying is true. And so the thing that we see is that there is a way to do it. I mean, there's a lot of times I just don't use a pronoun. I don't need to. There's ways to speaking with someone where you don't need to use their name. You could just talk to them, right? And so there's ways that you could tactfully avoid it. This is helpful when you're in a work situation, okay? And so, and I know we got someone backstage. Before I get to her, I want to transition, sorry, pun intended, to an email. It's sort of on topic. Some of you remember when we had a discussion, let's even call it, shall we, a debate. At least that's what he wants to say. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But we had someone in that wanted to talk about affirming Christianity, someone that claimed to be a Christian, that a Christian, and argued that Christianity affirms people to love people of the same gender, as long as they're not acting on it. They can live together, they could be married, they just can't have sex. That's what he was trying to argue. That where the Bible speaks condemningly about homosexuality, it is only because, in his opinion, that, and that's really what it is, it's his opinion, but he'll claim it's biblical, that the reason that Scripture speaks negatively about homosexuality is because it's abusive sexuality. Now, if you remember when he came on, his name is Anthony. It's, someone that I know personally. He used to attend the youth group when I was pastor. I know his family. And so he came in, and he still has not gotten over it. Even though I swear I wouldn't read any of his emails, I forgot, and I read this email because it's been a while. So success, you gave it a long enough time, and I forgot until I looked back at other emails and realized, oh, yeah, right. I wasn't going to read any of your emails. Because my last comment was to show that, he has to respond back, and so he is. But I think this is kind of interesting. So, if you remember when he was on, what did we talk about? He wanted to say that he could be with another man, and it's not sinful. And I asked him, does he lust that man? And he had to admit he did. Okay. And I pointed out that Jesus said lusting is adultery of the heart. Doesn't matter if you lust for the same sex or opposite sex, it's still a sin. And it blew his mind because he was all ready for these different arguments, but he wasn't ready for the root issue. You see, at the heart of the issue of homosexuality, of adultery, is lust. And so Sister Tara here is asking the question, did he really read the Bible? Did he read it? Yes. Did he believe it? No, because he wants to reinterpret it. So he obviously doesn't. So here's the email he just sent literally tonight, 5 minutes before the program started. So I figured I'd just answer it here. Sincere question is what he titles this. He says, I have a sincere question. What does the journey out of homosexuality look like? If I'm doing something that is worthy of death, Romans 1, there should be more to getting out of it than just repenting or changing my mind. Also, can you please help me harmonize 1 Corinthians 6 with Romans 1? They do contradict if one says where some of you and others says that we're given over. So what he's talking about is where it says in 1 Corinthians 6 mentions homosexuality as such were some of you. So in other words, that was a past tense thing. And then in Romans 1 where it says they're given over to their debased mind. So he says there's a contradictions. Let me continue. He says, I emailed you again because an adopted family member sent me a video from Robert Gorgon. I don't know who that is. It says, and nothing was said in it about turning around from a homosexual relationship. It made me think of our encounter. Also, homosexuality for me is not just lust, desire, or sex or any of that. The same relationship of self-sacrifice that you want to have with your spouse is what I want to have with mine. The idea of having it with the opposite gender partner terrifies me, among other things. Lastly, please accept the debate offer for real this time. Yes, you did. You called me a coward, and you on your own website, you called it a debate the first time, which you did lie about in your reply video. And then you said that it was essentially okay for you to lie about it because my position is based on a lie. So I have no reason to point out your dishonesty. That just does not seem like the best way for a human to be treated. But you can at least please answer the question of how you turn around and what it looks like. And please don't say Christian counseling. I've been through that 3+ years of that. Okay, so let's deal with these things. So his first question, what does the journey out of homosexuality look like? It looks like repenting. That's what it looks like, folks. It looks like turning from sin to Christ. Notice I didn't say sins, okay? It is turning from that prideful, self-centeredness where you think that you're God and God should bow down to you, that you should dictate the way things should be, that God should accept you on your terms. That's what it looks like. You turn from that. So it means, what are you going to turn from? Well, you're going to turn from thinking homosexuality is acceptable in God's sight. You're going to turn from thinking that you can lust after people and it's okay. You're going to turn from the view where you can argue that these things you're doing are okay. You're going to see all of them as wicked sinfulness. That's what it looks like. You have a genuine repulsion for the things that God calls sin, even when you do them. Yes, do I continue to sin? Yes, everyone does. but I'm repulsed when I do it. I do it, and there's times every one of us sins, and then as soon as we give into that, we hate it. Not the consequence of it, notice, but the sin itself, because that's what Christ died for. Kathy Demings is saying an example would be Rosetta Butterfield. That is what repentance. She turned to God that rescued her and saved her from her sin. She got out of that lifestyle. And, we end up seeing that is what you do. You don't continue in your sin. Now, do you still sin? Yes. But it's not the pattern of your life. John, the atomic apologist, says, Andrew, if I wasn't working at the hospital tonight, I would be your co-host. Well, John, I miss you and wish you would. All right. So what does it look like? It looks like repenting. Now, he says, if I'm doing something worthy of death, Romans 1, there should be more to getting out of it than just repenting or changing my mind. Says who? See, that next sentence is proving the exact point that I said. See, he's not repenting because he's doing what every man-made religion says, that you could do something to earn your righteousness, that you have to do something. That's the man-made religion. The biblical religion is to realize that we are sinners and we cannot do anything to save ourselves. God did it all at the cross. The fact that someone paid the eternal fine that I owe humbles me and makes me sick when I sin. Because this is what he died for. He paid an eternal fine that I owed. I owe him everything. Why do I not want to sin? Because I love Christ. Not because I hate the consequences, not because someone might find me out, but I love Christ and do not want to be an offense to him. That's why I don't want to sin. You see, and until, Anthony, you have that mindset, until you see it that way, till you recognize how wicked your sinfulness really is before an infinite holy God, you're not going to come to repentance because you're never going to hate your sinfulness enough. You're always going to latch onto it. Like in Pilgrim's Progress, when Christian goes to Interpreter's house and there's a guy that says he's got just a little sin and Christian is trying to witness to him and Interpreter says, come on, let's go. And he's like, oh, but he's ready to give it up. He says, oh, give it up tomorrow. And Interpreter says, tomorrow never comes. He says, but it was just a little sin. Interpreter says, it was not a little sin. It was a sin that he's willing to sacrifice his soul for all of eternity. That's not little. If you want to call it little, you're willing to sacrifice your soul in eternity for it. It's not little. All right, let's continue on with answering his questions. He said also, can you please harmonize 1 Corinthians 6 and Romans 1? They do contradict each other. Pause. Unless they're talking to two different groups of people about two different contexts. Oops. That's exactly what they're doing. One is speaking to believers. You committed these sins, but you repented of those sins, and they were in the past. 1 Corinthians 6. As such were some of you. Some of you were homosexuals, but it's in the past. But those in Romans 1 is speaking to people who know God, fight God. They're just before what he says about the homosexuality there, what does he say? They know God exists, but they suppress that truth in unrighteousness. And their suppression, what does it lead to? It leads to the homosexuality. Why? Because they want to so suppress the truth of God that they give themselves over to a debased mind. Does every homosexual do that? No, he's talking actually about the way society ends up working. When people give themselves over to a debased mind, they do things that are wickedly sinful, like homosexuality. It's not saying that every one of them is debased in God's mind because God knows who he's going to save. So they're not contradictory at all. They're two different contexts and two different groups of people. One speaking to believers and one speaking to unbelievers. One speaking to people who have come to repentance and humbled themselves, and one speaking to a proud people who are fighting God, shaking their fist, knowing that what he says is true, and they shake their fist anyway. Two totally different contexts. So that would be how to answer that. Now, I find it interesting because he says also, homosexuality for me is not just lust. Well, it doesn't matter what you say after that, Anthony, because it's a sin. You cannot say you're pleasing God in a relationship that God says is sinful, period. When you are lusting after someone who is the same sex, because God calls marriage to be one man and one woman, so anything where you're having a sexual desire for anyone outside of the marriage relationship, it is a sinful relationship and is never going to be blessed by God. So once he says it's not just lust, I don't have to go beyond that because he's admitting it is lust. Therefore, it is sinful. Therefore, it is never going to be blessed by God. All right. So that's the answer to his sincere question. But he keeps throwing this in. Ever since he came on, we had the issue with this whole word of debate. And so let me explain the difference. Again, different context. What is a debate and a discussion? He came on and he was saying that it was a debate and like he's challenged me to a debate and I'm somehow running from him. Any of you who watch this show regularly know that I do not run from a debate. I do this show and we proudly say that there are people who come in here and they have prepared to debate me for weeks and I don't know I'm doing a debate and they come in with their arguments ready to debate me and I go, okay, let's hear it. I'm not prepared for a debate. Now, is it an actual debate? Well, yes. Is it a formal debate? No. There's a difference there. As someone who does formal debating, there is a difference between what we would call a discussion, where you don't have time. There's no time clock. There's no, here's how a rigid format of opening comments, opening statements, followed by rebuttal, followed by cross-examination, followed by closing statements and a Q&A. That's a formal debate. He and I never had a formal debate. Now, he cried that, me and Aaron spoke over him and we didn't let him talk. Well, we actually went back because he kept making that argument. We actually went back. He spoke twice as much in the first hour as Aaron and I combined. We let him make his arguments. In the second half, he spoke equal time to Aaron and I. He spoke more than us. But he goes, you wouldn't let me speak. You guys spoke over me. No, we didn't. The time clock tells it. Sorry. You could go check that. That is not a subjective thing. That's an objective thing. You can go time it. Okay? And so I invited him in to have a discussion. Can you debate having a discussion? Yes. Is it a formal debate? No. So when I say having a formal debate, there's time clocks. He doesn't get to speak more than me. He has to actually answer questions, not sit there and ignore them like he did in the discussion, where he wanted to brush off the whole issue of lusting because it didn't fit his paradigm, because that broke everything that he was saying, because it doesn't matter what he says. Homosexuality is always a sin because it's lusting for someone who is not that's outside of a biblical marriage. Period. End of discussion. Full stop. Mic drop. There is nothing more he could say. So he wanted to avoid it. You can do that in a discussion. In a debate, you're going to get called out on that because you have a cross-examination period. So he keeps going back to that because he doesn't understand the difference between a formal debate or a debate you have during a discussion. You can debate topics. You can have disagreeing views. One makes an argument, another makes an argument. That is a debate. It's not a formal debate. Now, he says, I'm the one running from the debate. He's challenging me. Anthony, I'm right here. apologeticslive.com. Any Thursday night that we're on, you can come in and we can have the discussion. You want to have a formal debate? Now we need to have a moderator that's watching a clock, and we have a specific topic we're going to debate. You can't free fall it. You can't just say, well, I want to discuss this over here. No, we have a specific topic. That's what a formal debate is. So did I accept a formal debate with you? Well, I said, I'll do it. We just got to come up with the topic. Did we have a debate? No, we didn't. Not a formal debate. Did we debate while we were having a discussion? Yes, we did. So again, I get the point that when you have the leftists like this, the Marxists, they have to have a lack of integrity with language, because it's the only way they can make their points. They have to have this argument of saying, well, we got to redefine words, because the reality is that their arguments don't work if they don't redefine language. So, in conclusion with this, look, if Anthony wants to come in, we can have the discussion again. If he wants to have a formal debate, he can email me. We can come up with a topic, get a moderator, have the debate. I don't think it's going to go well with him, because the topic we'll choose is going to be one he can't handle the core argument against homosexuality. It's incompatible with Scripture. Okay? And he's trying desperately to get around the lust issue, and he can't. He can't. He admitted he lusts after guys. Done. It's debate is over at that point, because his argument fails at its root issue. So that is just some of the things. Now, when it comes to the transgender pronoun issue, I want to encourage us to be respectful, but not to lie. We should not affirm sinful behavior. And so, so Fatima is saying, Andrew, maybe get Rosetta Butterfield to come on the show on this topic. That actually would be good. I do know someone that knows her personally, so maybe I will reach out and see if we can make that happen. Fatima, if that doesn't happen after like a couple weeks, a month or so, get on me and make sure that I don't forget. And so, one of the things, though, when it comes to the pronoun issue, is I do not think that you should, when someone is demanding you use their pronoun, to use it. Now, one question that came up to me here privately, the person must not have wanted it to be on the show, so I won't give the name. What happens if you use someone's pronoun not realizing that they're biological male, and you just don't know, and you know them as a female? That's a good question. And I think in that case, if you're ignorant of it, you're introduced to the person as a female, not knowing they're biological male. I don't think it's a sin to call them by the wrong pronoun until you know that they're biologically the other pronoun. In other words, if you do it out of ignorance, I don't think that's a sin. I don't think you're wrong in doing so. It's when you know that they're biologically different than the pronoun they want to use, that's when I think it's an issue of affirming it. All right, question here from John. He says, I'm still wondering if Adam Curry is coming on the show. John, you can ask him. I gave him the link to join, to set up a time with me to record, and I haven't heard from him. So I know you tried setting that up. Maybe you could reach out to that email and say, hey, you can do it. I don't want to, I'm never one that wants to like press guests and try to strong arm them or force them. But if he does, that'll be on my Rap Report podcast that will do that. All right. Let me just let you know that if you guys want to get yourself a good night of sleep, want to encourage you guys to get yourself a My Pillow. My Pillow is, they're made here in the United States, but they are wonderful pillows. I love my pillow. It is something that I use every night. I travel with it. It's a great thing for my sleep. And so if you want to get a good night's sleep, you want to get their towel. Their towels are great. Their bath towels are like getting good absorbent towels are usually very heavy. These are not super heavy. They're medium weight as far as towels go, but more absorbent than any towel that I've used. So I love the My Pillow towels. I have their hand towels. I have their bath towels. We have their dishcloths. I have their mattress topper, which I absolutely love. So they have a bunch of great products. And if you use the promo code SFE, not only do you get yourself a great discount, but you also let them know you heard about them here from us, and that keeps them supporting us, which is important because we just had a sponsor who had dropped because they're just moving around their support to different podcasts. Now, as some of you know, I have been in the process of moving, and there's one thing that I have been really lacking. As I moved, I had to pack something up and, had to then, go and, be without it. And that is, my cold plunge. If you guys know me and know that I love my cold plunge, I hate the cold. I love the cold plunge now, but you asked my wife what it's like come morning when I have to get in the cold plunge and I'm doing anything to avoid it. I hate actually getting into it. I love it getting out, and then I'll love it for the next 24 hours till I have to get in again. Just reduces all the inflammation. I mean, my back pain, my neck pain goes away. It just helps create better mitochondria in the cells, which helps with a whole lot of things like insulin resistance. It'll actually help you to lose weight if you're losing, if you're dealing with the fact of the insulin resistance issue. Now, I will say that cold plunging is not for everybody. If you have heart issues, really high blood pressure, not so good for you. But it is really good and helpful. But you can go to Plunge, and the code that we have with it is strivingforeternity.org/plunge. That's strivingforeternity.org/plunge. They have very well built, very good plunges that I have. They also have saunas. Now, I can't speak to their saunas because I haven't used their saunas, but if you like heat therapy, there's a lot of benefits to heat therapy. It also helps produce mitochondria in the cells. That will help you. So you can go to strivingforeternity.org/plunge. Now, if you're saying, but Andrew, I just can't afford it. I mean, I hear the health benefits. I know what you're saying, and living a healthy life, I'd like that. Well, we got in touch with another company that is good quality, but not as good, but also nowhere near the price. And it's the Pod Company. And so you could go to strivingforeternity.org/pod. They have different types of cold plunges and saunas. I actually am trying out a brand new sauna they have that's a portable sauna that is one that they claim that it can get up to 185 degrees in just 10 to 15 minutes. Now, in my initial test, it couldn't get above 150, 155, and they realized they sent me one of the early models that was not supposed to be sent. So we will see when they are shipping me a new model, the proper model, they said, and so we will see if that works better. And so I will tell you as I test that one out, I'll let you know. But if you want to try these things at a much lower price point, strivingforeternity.org/pod. Lastly, want to give our sponsor one of my favorite sponsors, and that is Logos Bible Software. If you go to logos.com/SFE, Logos used to be super expensive, and they're not anymore. Now they have their subscription-based options. If you pay for 2 years at one time in advance, you can get your Logos for about $7 a week. which is really good just as an intro one. If you want to get all the language works and things like that, it's going to be a bit more. But it is wonderful software to be able to quickly find things, to study things, to really get to know God's word. And if you're going to debate topics like, well, what pronouns to use or things like that, it might be important to know what God's word says. And being able to study it will help. So go to logos.com/SFE. That lets them know you heard about them here at Striving for Eternity. And so with that, I'm just trying to see if there's any comments. Let me bring in Melissa, who's backstage, and that'll allow me some time to look at some of the comments as well. So, Melissa, we have a hiss from you, so I don't know if
wait a second. I thought can you hear me?
I hear you. It's a little better now. It was when you first came in.
Okay. Okay, I got a question, but I got some comments about the current subject about the
Sure.
about pronouns.
Sure.
Well, one thing I did on they have, you know what LinkedIn is?
Yes.
LinkedIn. Okay.
That's like a social media for like kind of
for business, for business people, like kind of a social network. And they had a thing that said put like your pronoun. I put Jesus is Lord, and it says on my thing underneath my name, it said Jesus is Lord. This is my pronoun.
That's a good pronoun. I like it.
Yeah. And then also I don't know if you're having the subject because of this, but I heard that the man who killed Catholic kids in a church, that he was identifying being a woman.
Well, what you have is, and the media hates to announce this, but in the last, 7 of these school shootings, they've been transgender, and they've been Christian schools, and they want to ignore the fact that it's targeted against Christians. It was really quite, and they want to ignore that they're transgender. Now, what was really interesting was with this latest one, there was a news report that said that the person who shot up this school had Donald Trump carved into their gun.
Yeah.
What they neglected to say was the word "kill Donald Trump." So they make it sound like this crazy lunatic is a Donald Trump supporter. And the reality is the person carved in his gun, kill Donald Trump, not Donald Trump. So they make it sound like they're a supporter, and when the reality is he hates Trump. He's a liberal. Yeah,
they wanted to I think they wanted to downplay the transgenderism too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's what they want to do, and that's what you end up seeing. Is that they want to ignore. I mean, think how long it took them to finally allow the one person's manifesto to come out, and they didn't want it because it was clearly targeted against Christians. This one came out and is very clearly Christian in a broad sense, targeted against Christians. All the all the stuff that they were saying was targeted against Christians. Okay,
I gotta go to my question now.
Yep.
Okay, I was thinking the other day, like, when people will say something like a little kid to say they're cute, but then the synonym is adorable. A lot of people use adorable, and it kind of bothers me because I thought like adoration should be towards God, but I don't know, is it a sin to find something adorable? Or
yeah, and this is a good question because there are things we use, words we use, kind of like in the discussion I had about the word debate. It can have different contexts. We have a lot of words that people will say, well, that's only should be used for God. The word awesome.
Yeah.
Only say God is awesome. Is saying someone's adorable. Is that adoration? Well, we should only give God adoration, right? So there's things like that. But I think there's a different context for it. Using the word inspired. Well, only Scripture's inspired. It's God spoken. We because we have a Christian thinking to it, sometimes we get bent up on certain words. So can we say someone or something is awesome? Yeah, we can. Do we mean awesome in the same way that we have awe for God because he is infinitely holy, infinitely just, infinitely everything, right? It's totally different. So when we use that word, we recognize that it is in a different context. When we say we're proud of our children, well, pride's a bad thing. It's sin. But it's a different type of pride.
Yeah.
I'm very, as I look at my daughter raising her children, I have a great amount of pride watching how she is as a mother. I think that she's doing a far better job raising her children than my wife and I did raising ours. And that's one of the things that you end up seeing. If I believe I remember someone in a parenting book said, you know how good a parent you are when you see how your children or grandchildren are raised, because the idea is that when you raise your children, like if you've changed from a bad parenting model to a better, well, your children will be even better, right? And so I can look at that and be proud of what she's doing. I can look at my son and he's an entrepreneur and has his business, and I can be proud of the work he's doing. Right? He's a hard worker. I can be proud of that. That doesn't have to be a sinful thing. I can say that someone's adorable, but I'm not giving adoration to them the way I would God. I'm not worshiping them. Mm-hmm. And I think that when we look at this, we have to recognize how are the people using the word. Now, if someone is using the word in a way that, like, in adoration that should be for God, then it's a problem. Let me, before I was a Christian, one of the very sinful things, I hate the thought that I did this, but I did it out of ignorance. But when someone would sneeze and people would say, God bless you, I would actually turn and say, yes, I do.
Oh.
Or when they sneezed, I would say, I bless you. I mean, that is so blasphemous. And I know that as a Christian, but I was ignorant of that. Right? But as a Christian, I hate the fact that I did that. But now that would be utterly sinful, because what was I doing? Well, I was blaspheming. I mean, I was trying to take adoration that should be to God, because saying God bless you, I understand that most people mean nothing by it. But the idea is that, when you're sneezing, people used to think that your heart stops. So the fact that you're still alive, that's God's blessing. Well, that's speaking of the God of the universe, right? I was trying to claim that I was the God of the universe. That is wickedly sinful, right? But that's different than saying I adore someone's adorable or I adore someone, right? If I say I adore my wife, it doesn't mean that I worship her. It doesn't mean that I give her the adoration I should only give to God. It means that I find a lot of value in her. I'm attracted to her, things like that. Does that help?
Yes, that's a very good answer. Thank you. Well, bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks for coming in. Let's see. We got a couple more questions that came in, or comments that I did grab. Let's see. Okay. So Fatima says, suicide rates are up for transgenders, and they say it's because they aren't being given all the love and acceptance they need. How do we as Christians answer this? Well, the answer is this is a never-ending shift. Okay, they originally, think back in the 80s, the argument back then was, look, if you just accept us, like if you just let us come out of the closet and accept us for who we are, we would be better. We'd be happy. The suicide rate is up against for homosexuals because we're not having the acceptance. And if you just accept us, the rate would go down. And the acceptance started happening. And what did they do? Well, now they're transgender, and you got to accept them because the suicide rate is up. And now they're transitioning, and they're still not happy. And it's because you're not giving them enough love. You have to affirm them more and more and more, but it never ends. Right? If this was allowed to keep going, next is going to be bestiality. Well, I can't help the fact that I like a dog or a cat or whatever. And you have to accept this so I could not commit suicide. The thing is people are not committing suicide because they're not being accepted. See, the acceptance is, I want to be the center of the universe. I want everyone else to focus on me and give me what I want. I want to be spoiled. I want to be entitled. And that's not reality. What they need is some hard dose of truth that they're going to have to accept. That the world doesn't revolve around them, and they need to accept reality and stop trying to live in a fantasy. Okay? So let's see. Fatima went on to say, indeed, they were given lots of acceptance and policy changes in their favor. That's when the suicide rates actually shot up. And so the reason it shot up is quite frankly because they thought this would be the solution to everything. And they found out that they still had their problems. Why did they have the problems? Because their problem wasn't the acceptance. The problem was their sin, their guilty conscience. So, something else Fatima said here when we were talking about the saunas, she said, I love sauna. Sometimes it's called a steam room here. You go in and you come out and it feels like you jogged 12 kilometers. Well, the reality is there's a reason for that. If you have trouble with weight loss and you really, like if you're very heavy or you cannot exercise, for example, Justin Peters, who's in a scooter, he can't walk because of cerebral palsy. I encouraged him to get a sauna. Get something where he can go in and sit, because what it ends up doing is getting your heart rate up, and it will work. So sitting in a sauna at 144 degrees for an hour is equivalent to a moderate workout. So yes, you'll feel that way. You also get a bunch of toxins out of your skin and all that. A really good comment though, here by John, Atomic Apologetics. We're talking about sponsors, and I mentioned we dropped a sponsor, and he says, why don't you stick with value for your value and donate to Striving for Eternity? And I should mention, you can do that, folks. If you go to strivingforeternity.org, you can donate directly to us. That is the best thing you could do for us, because the money doesn't come through, it comes directly to us. I get that, if you buy a pillow and a software or a cold plunge or sauna, we do get some money from that. We don't get all the money that you're spending, but you're getting something out of that. I get it. But if you do find value out of what we're doing here, if this episode that you heard tonight was something you really got a lot out of, you could do a couple things that would help us greatly. One, share it with a bunch of people, especially with those that, disagree with the position I hold. So maybe they would hear a different position, but share it with a bunch of friends. You could pray for us. It's not easy to do some of these things and to do the prep and all to have a show like this. But a third, as John mentioned, you could support us. If you get value out of the show, you can go to strivingforeternity.org / support, I think it is. But just go to strivingforeternity.org. There's a support button up at the top, and you can support us. I will tell you, we desperately need it right now. Our supporters have dropped drastically in the last few years, and we are having to a point where we go into churches that can't afford to have speakers. Our monthly donors help us do that, and the reality is that we are not able to just say yes to every church anymore because there's not the money in the bank, and it's just the reality. Now, I'm not asking you to do anything that I don't do. I'm probably one of the, if not the largest supporter, I'm the second largest supporter of the ministry. So I support the ministry myself out of my own funds. It's not that for those who don't know, the ministry is not my source of livelihood. Okay. That's one of the things we have with our speakers. Our speakers don't make their livelihood from speaking for the ministry. We have other means of income or making money, and that's what we rely on so that we can help churches that can't afford it, so that they can have a big church conference-like feel in a small church. And another way you could help us, a fourth way, is invite us to your church. We'll come. We don't care the size. We don't care things like that. We'll come to where there is a need. And we just want to be a blessing to the local church. So with that, I just would say if you could do any of those or all of those, that's great. If you want to invite, and we have 4 different speakers. So if you want some of the better speakers, don't invite me. Have Dan or Aaron, you've seen them here, or Anthony Russo. It's a different Anthony than who used to speak with us, but Anthony Russo, we have 4 different speakers, can speak on many topics. And speaking about speaking, the next 2 weeks I will be traveling, so I won't be here. Next week, I'll be in Washington, Indiana at the Powerhouses conference that they're having. I will be dealing with a topic of God's sovereignty over mankind. That is September 5th and to the 7th. Also, that Sunday, I should say, I'll be on Sunday the 7th, I will be speaking at Heritage Baptist Church. Heritage Baptist Church is in Vincennes, Indiana. And so the following weekend, I will be at the Roadmap to Revival. That's September 11th to I'll be there actually the 12th to the 14th. Roadmap to Revival is in Tullahoma, Tennessee, Jeffrey Rice's church. James White will be speaking, Keith Foskey, a whole bunch of us. There'll be a great conference. That is in Tennessee. But if you can't make it to Tennessee and you're on the East Coast, Aaron Brewster, one of the speakers I just mentioned, will be at my home church at Oxford Valley Chapel. And if you want to get the details for that, just go to oxfordvalleychapel.org. And Aaron is going to be speaking from the 12th to 14th. He's going to preach on Sunday. And so that's going to be dealing with the topics, basically the big questions in life. What are we doing here? He's gonna talk about our responsibility to God, to the church, to the unbeliever, and the responsibility we have within our family. So because of that, I won't be here the next 2 weeks because I will be traveling. I don't know if Drew or Tom will do a show. If so, just tune in to the website. We'll change the website and have it set up, and you'll know because it'll have a different topic than the one we had tonight, and that's how you'll know. So let me just put, Melissa is saying, she says, Striving Fraternity, there are different funds to give to. Is it best to give to general fund? Yeah, if you want to give to general fund, you can. There's different ways you could designate it. So if you want to designate it specifically for our travel, we had one person who used to donate thousands of dollars, literally every month, just for our travel. And so that was very helpful. That's what allowed us to really get out into so many churches. And when it's designated like that, we have to use it for that. When you give it to general fund, it's for everything. It's used for whatever there's a need, travel, or the putting on of the Christian podcast community, some of the materials we produce, things like that. So any amount helps. We're grateful for all of it. So Kathy says, I'll probably put this as the last comment, but we'll see. She says, thank you. Good show, Andrew. I appreciate your teaching. Well, thanks. It is a little bit harder to do this with all the comments and everything that come in. I was thankful that some of you were kind of quieter tonight, which isn't saying much in the comment section. Sometimes you guys are really lively. I encourage you to check the show out live. I know the thousands that listen on the podcast, but it's way better live when you have the comments. We have a great audience. So try to tune in on Thursday nights, 8 to 10 Eastern time. That's New York City time. You can just go to apologeticslive.com. You can watch it right there. That's where the YouTube will be playing. Or you can watch it on X. My X, if you want to follow me on X, it's just at Andrew_SFE. And that's my handle on X. And that'd be fine to do. And so, because you can follow it on X, you can follow it on our YouTube channel if you want to just do that. So let's see. Fatima says, I couldn't donate to SFE because I don't have a credit card or any of the Intel e-wallet apps. You might be able to do bank-to-bank checks, things like that. You could always check with your bank, and there's ways of doing that. And Fatima gives us our closing comment she says, always fun and learning lots from SFE. Thank you. Well, thank you to the audience. I really appreciate it. This show would be really boring just listening to me speak, for 2 hours. But I do hope that you guys are getting value. What we're doing, instead of trying to have guests with topics, I've been trying to go through some different topics that are apologetics in nature to deal with how do we answer these things. I hope that you've enjoyed them. I hope they're valuable to you. And I hope that you'll be sharing these with other people. And with that, let me just say that until next week, remember to strive to make today an eternal day for the glory of God. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.